It's no different than when ChatGPT first swept across Silicon Valley. I think that's what's going to happen in crypto. On an equivalent basis, Ethereum's closer to 15,000. And that makes sense.
비트마인의 회장이자 펀드스트렛의 CIO인 톰 리가 이더리움의 미래에 대해 이야기했습니다. 그는 왜 지금이 이더리움의 격변의 순간인지, 그리고 어떻게 구조적 상승이 시작될 수 있는지를 설명합니다. 그가 제시한 이더리움의 새로운 기준, 지금부터 확인해 보시죠.
Let's talk about ETH first. Talk to me about what we should expect next.
Well, I think Ethereum, is a chain that I think is getting a second look. I know that there have been criticisms of it in the past because of either how layer 2s and layer 1s interact or just really sort of progress and upgrades to the network. But to us, I think the real thing we have to recognize as we look at what's happening in the real world is that Wall Street is converging onto crypto, and they're choosing to do a lot of this work on Ethereum because stablecoins have completely changed Wall Street's mind about how useful crypto can be. As we've said, the stablecoins have created the ChatGPT moment for crypto because we're seeing consumers really use it in a viral way. Merchants are beginning to really love it, especially outside the US. And now banks are realizing it's actually a decent business model. We just saw Citigroup even just say that they're looking at creating a stablecoin, even if it's just to manage deposit base, but still it is really Wall Street converging onto crypto. And at the end of the day, a couple things are going to be important. Wall Street wants to find a chain that's operating compliantly in the US, and they want to find a big one and where there's already a lot of real world assets, tied up and on the layer 1. And that's why Ethereum, we think, is going to become extremely relevant over the next decade.
Well, you mentioned some of the, critiques that Ethereum has faced in recent history. And I want to talk a little bit about those. Two of them is that, Ethereum has become a little bit slower, a little bit more expensive. And as more Wall Street giants start looking at how to interact on the chain, do you think that Ethereum can keep up?
Yes, and they just have to create the right incentives, between the layer 2s and layer 1s, and make sure there's just not too much gas out there, and that we can absorb that supply. But I think that's where these treasury companies are playing a pretty important role, and they're earning money staking. And I think the reality is that if there is a rejuvenation of interest around any token or any token platform, it also rejuvenates people's creativity and interest in making it more usable. So to us, this ChatGPT moment, which is converging around Ethereum, I think is going to also help unleash a wave of innovation. It's no different than when ChatGPT first swept across Silicon Valley, and this is after everybody had invested decades on SaaS. But guess what? Now there's many, many, many venture-funded businesses around using AI and ChatGPT that are exploding and getting to a $100 million run rate so quickly. Well, I think that's what's going to happen in crypto. I think this is a really big moment for the industry to realize that as Wall Street converges and they're bringing a lot of interest and bringing a lot of new users and a lot of new applications, that this could transform actually the importance of smart contracts and Ethereum. So I think Ethereum's sort of dominance could actually grow dramatically.
톰 리는 월스트리트 자본이 본격적으로 암호화폐 시장에 유입되는 과정에서 이더리움이 핵심 플랫폼으로 자리 잡을 것이라고 강조합니다. 그 중심에는 스테이블 코인의 폭발적인 확산이 있는데요. 스테이블 코인은 빠르고 저렴한 결제가 가능하게 하며 상인과 은행들이 실질적인 비즈니스 모델로 적극 채택하고 있습니다. 이처럼 실생활의 활용이 늘어나자 월스트리트 역시 암호화폐의 실용성과 성장 가능성에 주목하기 시작했고, 그 중심 플랫폼으로 이더리움을 선택하고 있는 것입니다. 그는 이러한 흐름을 이더리움의 챗 GPT 순간이라고 표현하는데요. 과거 챗 GPT가 실리콘밸리의 혁신의 물결을 불러일으켰듯 이더리움을 기반으로 한 투자와 개발이 암호화폐 산업 전반에 새로운 변화를 촉진할 것이라는 분석입니다. 실물 자산의 온체인화, 스마트 계약의 활용 확대, 다양한 신규 어플리케이션 등장 등에서 이더리움의 역할은 더욱 강화될 것이며 그에 따라 점유율도 상승할 것이라 그는 예측했습니다. 그리고 혹시 거래 수수료 절반을 다시 환급받는 방법 아직 모르시나요? 단 5분만 투자하면 평생 수수료 돌려받는 셀퍼럴, 선택이 아닌 필수입니다. 자세한 내용은 영상 더보기란을 확인해 보세요.
What's your price target for ETH as we head into the second half of the year?
Fundstrat, Sean Farrell is the head of digital assets research, and he's given me some informal sort of targets. One way he thinks of this is that if we look at Circle and its free cash multiple, which now is like 130 times EBITDA, on an equivalent basis, Ethereum's closer to 15,000. And that makes sense. I think the layer one, as you know, as you get into layer one, you should apply a higher multiple to like sort of theoretical usage because it's the same reason software companies get higher multiples than retailers, right? The more you're getting away from the customer and the more it's pure signal, you apply higher multiples to that business. And so I think in the near term, our technical strategist Mark Newton thought we could be seeing 4,000 before the end of the month for Ethereum, but that's not where it peaks. He just thinks that that's the first target. And then I think something, if Sean Farrell's math is correct, then I think 10 to 15,000 actually makes sense too.
By the end of the year?
It could be end of year, it could be sooner. I mean, it just really depends. But that wouldn't be the cap, but that just shows you that's really, a level above 5,000, it would be a decisive, all-time breakout for Ethereum. So I think that's a significant level to watch as well.
Talk to me a little bit about BitMine's playbook when it comes to the Ethereum corporate treasury.
A lot of what our strategy has been disclosed in our press releases, so I'm glad to talk a lot about it. But to us, that at the core is our belief that Ethereum is dramatically undervalued as a token. That, and for the reasons I described, that crypto is seeing its ChatGPT moment, and really the second order beneficiary there is Ethereum. And so acquiring an asset that can appreciate by 10 times or more is a really good use of a treasury. In fact, MicroStrategy, when they began their treasury strategy, Bitcoin was 11,000, and it's 120,000 today. And so I think that's foremost where we're coming from. And some people say, well, why don't you just buy Ethereum outright? Well, an Ethereum treasury company can actually increase your ETH holdings per share by taking advantage of capital markets and volatility to raise capital. And they can also earn money from staking. And for instance, BitMine initially funded with $250 million of ETH, and that was closed on July 9th or July 8th. And then 3 days later, BitMine increased the treasury holdings by an additional $250 million. So in just 3 days, doubled the amount of treasury holdings, and that was as of Friday last week. So you can see that there is an advantage to a treasury company because what you thought you had was of ETH relative per share just doubled in 3 days based on just the company acquiring more ETH. And of course, that activity continues. So I think that there's an advantage to owning a treasury company that is using capital markets to increase your ETH holdings per share.
For investors who have already maybe allocated into Bitcoin, the Bitcoin ETF, or a Bitcoin treasury company, and are now looking at similar products for ETH, how would you explain the differences? Because ETH is a little bit more of a complicated story, right? So if you were talking to an investor, how would you differentiate between the two?
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to kind of have some framework in mind. We're still adamant fans of Bitcoin because to me, Bitcoin is, first of all, it is really the ultimate form of trust at the moment, and it is digital gold in an easy way. And if someone says, well, what does that make it worth? Well, gold's 22 trillion network value, so Bitcoin should be worth $1 million. And there's plenty of future businesses that can be built around Bitcoin because of its stability. Ethereum is a smart contract enabled platform. And so it is unique because you can actually store real things onto the blockchain, whether you use layer 1 or layer 2. And I think maybe the real killer app, and this is what stablecoins are showing, is that as we move into a world of like AI and we're trying to create, units of pricing and to simplify the movement of goods, and things, simple examples of like tokenizing things from the real world onto a blockchain, you couldn't do it really on Bitcoin because that's not what Bitcoin's designed to do. So I think as you're thinking of Wall Street converging onto crypto and then AI innovations taking place and the idea of using even tokens or stable coins around that, well, then that's really when it comes to saying, well, Ethereum really is the largest smart contract platform in terms of network value. And that's what makes it attractive.
톰리는 이더리움이 현재 크게 저평가되어 있으며 실적 기준으로 환산하면 1만에서 1만 5천 달러 수준이 적정 가치라고 분석합니다. 실제로 펀드 스트렛의 계산에 따르면 이더리움의 에비타 대비 밸류에이션은 소프트웨어 기업처럼 훨씬 높은 멀티플이 정당하다고 보는데요. 여기서 에비타란 기업이 영업을 통해 벌어들이는 순수한 이익을 뜻합니다. 세금이나 감가상각 등의 회계 항목을 제외한 실질적인 현금 창출 능력을 보여주죠. 이는 흔히 기업 가치를 평가할 때 사용하는 지표로 기술 기업처럼 수익 구조가 고도화된 경우 더 높은 멀티플을 부여받는 게 일반적입니다. 이더리움도 이러한 관점에서 훨씬 높은 가치를 받을 수 있다는 것이 그의 설명입니다. 이러한 전망을 기반으로 비트마인 같은 기업은 트레저리 기업으로서 이더리움 보유량을 적극적으로 늘리는 전략을 펼치고 있습니다. 예를 들어 비트마인은 초기 2억 5천만 달러 규모의 이더리움을 확보한 뒤 단 3일 만에 이를 2배로 늘리며 주당 보유량도 같이 증가시켰는데요. 여기에 스테이킹 수익까지 더하면 단순 매수보다 훨씬 효율적인 전략이 됩니다. 이러한 흐름은 단순 수요 증가를 넘어 공급을 잠그는 효과를 일으키는데요. 이는 시장에 유통되는 이더리움 수량을 줄이고 가격 상승 압력을 높이는 요인으로 크게 작용할 것으로 예측됩니다.
If we think about that through a crypto lens, talk to me about where we are and where we're heading.
Well, yeah, it's, I generally agree with people who say crypto responds to global liquidity. And so if central banks are easing, then we should see it in crypto prices first. And that's why crypto actually is a leading indicator for the stock market. And the fact that Bitcoin broke out to all-time highs is actually bullish for the S&P. But the interesting thing is that crypto is still not that widely held. So I think that, Bitwise has a great stat. They say 95% of Bitcoin's been mined, and only 95% of the traditional finance world doesn't own Bitcoin. So there's a real mismatch. And so I think Bitcoin continues to be the leading crypto asset to watch. But to us, as risk appetite recovers, Ethereum and small caps are pretty highly correlated. And I think that that's why Ethereum, in percentage terms, has more upside for the next few years.
오늘 영상 도움이 되셨다면 구독, 좋아요 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.